I back up my actions, fact, don't ask, grab reactions, jacked attack with every word, then act with class as they hear me snap.
Welcome to Close and Engage with me, your host, Trevor. Today's a fun topic. Wentus has asked the viability of a American Iron Dome system, and I'm here to break down why not. Um, so we'll go ahead and get into that. And to all 66 of you that tune into these, thank you. You're really the reason why I keep doing these, even with such low numbers. That and the shorts tend to pick up quite a few. So without further ado, let's get in it. American Iron Dome and air defense, and why it's practically impossible. Let's get into it. So, say you're at work doing your 9 to 5, grinding through the day, and some butt munch across the world decides it is time to end America in fire. This is where we get the Missile Defense Agency. The Missile Defense Agency, or MDA, is a multi-branch department that utilizes personnel and equipment from the United States Air Force, Space Force, Army, and Navy to identify, intercept, and destroy missile threats to the United States, her allies, and foreign assets. One nifty little thing I ran across in this is that we've actually had an ambassador in charge of this before. So you've had Navy admirals, Air Force generals, Army generals, and somewhere in there, a random ambassador became head of this agency. But these guys, as soon as they detect a launch using the STSS, or Space Tracking and Surveillance System, what they'll do is they'll start kicking into gear. They go from a state of readiness to a state of action. So the U.S. Air Force and Space Force use numerous satellites to detect and track possible threats. Defense Support Program satellites stay in geosynchronous orbit around the globe to monitor threats as they emerge using various sensors. The new one, space-based infrared system, uses infrared sensors to detect missiles. They are looking at replacing the Defense Support Program with the space-based infrared system. And I'm willing to bet that we have more types of detection in and around Earth orbit. One of the ones that I'm willing to guess on would be the NASA satellites used to identify forest fires, because they've been used recently by open intel analysts to watch the war in Ukraine unfold. Something with that much resolution, I'm willing to bet when it was first launched, definitely had a more covert reason for being there. So once the STSS decides to pick up on the missiles and their launch points, it also starts being followed by LRDR, or the Long Range Discrimination Radar. This thing can see out to 2,999 miles for terrestrial targets, things in atmo, things in air, or even surface. And then looking out in towards space or space-based targets, 28,580 miles. This thing is made to track multiple targets at once, and everywhere I looked, you could not see how many targets it could track. So the only thing really stopping this thing from seeing further than 2,999 miles is actually the curvature of the Earth. If the Earth were flat, then it would be able to see almost all the way around it. Or if it were put up higher, but if you put it up higher, I mean, a building this heavy would probably collapse. Following the LRDR, we also have the SBX-1, which is actually a naval ship. This thing has a detection range of 2,500 miles. It has highly precise readings with radar antenna that weighs about 4 million pounds using X-band radar. That giant bubble up top is the radar dish. Then it has several, I'd almost call them baby radars or support radars that help feed into the large one. The large one is actually not even a dome. That's more of several antennas inside of that dome. and the dome itself is fabric or some sort of rubberized material that they use air pressure to inflate. This keeps the antennas safe from, say, corrosion or weather. It can also rotate as much as you can consider it rotating. I believe it is 280 degrees going left to right or transversal, and then elevation. I think it can go up 18 degrees. There's only one of these in the U.S. stockpile right now. There were plans for more. However, at this time, Department of Defense and the Missile Defense Group have decided not to make another one. Instead, they use smaller ships to cover when this one is at port, receiving repairs and maintenance, replenishment of supplies. Of those smaller ships, our old friend the Ticonderoga class Aegis cruisers with a detection range of 230 miles for ballistic missile threats. The cool thing about this thing is it's mobile. So if we get rumblings of a target or a group, a country, any actor thinking about launching ballistic missiles or intercontinental ballistic missiles, we can move a fleet in the area and monitor from there. That's if the SBX 1 is off station, or even if it is on station, more eyes the better, right? And then following our Aegis, we've got the Link 16. Link 16 is actually a communication system. So when the satellites first see missiles launching, when the radars start following the missiles, they have to communicate with the rest of the force. The Link 16 is a tactical data link that connects all NATO and some non NATO forces to the same tactical network for rapid information sharing between units, branches, and militaries. It is generally hack and jam resistant. And what I mean by non NATO forces would be groups like South Korea, Japan, Australia, close allies that are still not in the NATO group. Um, I do believe Israel is also part of the Link 16 initiative. And I don't honestly know who else. However, the Link 16 literally links your planes, your boats, all the way down to your standard infantryman. Everyone can talk at all times. It is quite possibly one of the biggest advantages that our military has. While everyone thinks that the biggest gun is the most important, it's really communication over long distances and being able to share as much information as quickly and accurately as possible. So now that radars and satellites have seen missiles launch, they're using Link 16 to start telling people there's a launch, get in position, and how to get in position, where to get in position. The first thing that you're going to see on station is going to be Air Force interceptors if they're close enough. So a launch from China, you'll see interceptors from Japan as well as carrier-based groups start to try to catch the missiles before they reach altitude or an altitude that the planes cannot follow. However, I will remind you or just inform you for those who don't know. Number one, the U.S. has been able to shoot satellites out of space. We did it, I believe, in the 70s or 80s with an F-15. Then the more recent saturation attack from Iran toward Israel, there were American F-35s and British F-35s, as well as Israeli F-35s and 16s in the air, taking down ballistic missiles that their homemade missile defense system couldn't get to. So these are an option. Um, Honestly, though, I will say you can see these on both ends from the launch and toward the middle, which would be considered apogee or mid-course, seeing as we can shoot satellites out of space, we can hit missiles in low orbit or even a degrading orbit. And then lastly, you can also see them during final stage. During descent. Descent will be a little bit difficult, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But literally every U.S. fighter does have the ability to do this. We're talking F-15, F-16, F-22, F-35. Yeah. A-10 can't, obviously. It's not fast enough and it's not built for that. And recently, a Ukrainian F-16, using one of the F-16s we gave them, shot down 6 cruise missiles. 4 of them with his own missiles, and then the last 2 with his onboard cannon. He thought he was only engaging one, but one missile was in the shadow of the second. So he took out both. That's actually very dangerous for the pilots, considering shrapnel and spall from explosions could have damaged his jet. But a testament to the plane itself and the pilot, he took them out, and was able to land the plane home safely without any extra holes in either. So our next step is going to be the RIM 161 Standard Missile 3, just shortened to SM3. The range on these things for Block 1A and B is between 560 and 745 miles. Block 2A, there hasn't been a 2B as far as I can find yet, is 745 miles. These things have a flight ceiling of 559 to 642 miles. In other words, that's where they stop. They can go no higher. Max speed for 1A and B is 6,710 miles, or Mach 8.8. Block 2A is 10,066 miles per hour, reaching Mach 13.2. These are guided in by Aegis radar and launched from shipboard VLS cells. We've talked about these in the Navy video before. This missile boosts in 3 stages. So you have your initial launch to clear the cell. Then your second stage will burn and get it up into altitude. Then third stage will get it exactly where it needs to be and decouple. So you're really just getting the warhead on target instead of the entire vertical shaft of this thing. So once it reaches 30 seconds until intercept, the warhead will seek its target, guided in by the Aegis, and will confirm the target with its own sensors. Then it will use onboard aerojets to maneuver to its target for impact. It delivers the equivalent of about 68 pounds of TNT to destroy it. Most ships carry a mix between air defending missiles like the RIM 161 and ballistic missiles of sorts, or even cruise missiles. However, if a ship does launch as many as it can, you can see something like 20, 30, 40 of these things go into the air. They're good for anti-cruise missile, anti-ballistic missile, and anti-aircraft. So the fleet will usually have several ships with several cells full of these. You can launch quite a few. Honestly, if I'm not playing around, if I'm being dead serious with you right now, one of our fleets, just one of our numbered fleets from the US Navy, could probably take down the entirety of most countries' air forces. Then we have our next step, which is the ground-based mid-course defense system. The US has 44 of these things, 44 missiles, in Alaska and California, with the majority being in Alaska. I believe it's something like 80 to 90% of those are in Alaska. The Missile Defense Agency has requested an additional 20. They have not been delivered yet. They're rather advanced. It takes a while to build. They're rather complicated. Now, the reason that we have so few of these is because the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty of 1972. This treaty limited the United States and the USSR to 2 anti-ballistic missile silos, missile sites each, one for their capital and one for another site. Each site was only allowed, or it was either each country or each site was only allowed to have 100 missiles total. The U.S. formally withdrew in 2002 under George G.W. Bush in response to the 9/11 terror attacks, claiming the world has changed and we must change with it. This is a large reason for why we are so handicapped when it comes to missile defense. It's only been 23 years. But when it comes to defense and defense building and procurement, it's like a muscle or a skill. If you don't exercise it, you lose it. Much like shipbuilding. If you're not building ships for this generation, you're not going to have people around next generation that knows how to do it. Same thing with these missiles here, which is why it's taking so long for these 20 requested missiles. We have to figure out how to build blessed things all over again. And we haven't innovated on them. We haven't innovated on a lot because we were so stymied by the ABM of 1972. But the ABM can also carry the multiple kill vehicle. Um, these things have been in production on and off for the past 20 plus years. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and the larger American military contractors have been working with each other to build these. So, delivered into low orbit by the GMD, this weapon system follows tracks, in other words, targets, but they call them tracks because they're cool and smart, and I'm just a dumb grunt. From the Ballistic Missile Defense System branch of the Missile Defense Agency, using the Aegis and Aegis Ashore, which is just basically the same Aegis radar on our cruisers put on shore. Super powerful, super cool radar. Once the target is close enough, the MKV, multiple kill vehicle, launches baby vehicles, smaller vehicles that will glide to the target for kinetic kill. I know I say glide, it basically launches itty bitty. Well, I guess they're not itty bitty, but launches smaller missiles or kinetic kill objects to hit the target and destroy it or disable it at very least. Then we get to our next layer. Let's see, missile defense and air defense, you have to have layers like an onion. If you just put one up, it's paper thin. So now we have the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD. There's not a lot of information on this thing. I can't really find it. It's new. Pretty blessed new. Anyway, it has a range of 120 miles estimated. A flight ceiling of 93 miles, a max speed of 6,300 miles per hour, or Mach 8.2. We have 7 batteries of these, with each battery having about 6 trucks. It uses the same chassis as the HIMARS. We've gotten really modular with a lot of our weapon systems lately. And we are looking at getting an 8th battery this year, so another 6 trucks equipped with these. It uses a kinetic kill method. In other words, it hits the target dead on to defeat missile or ballistic missile threats. Then we have everyone's favorite, the Patriot missile system. This thing has been around forever. One of the people that I personally follow on YouTube, Habitual Line Crosser. Number one, he explains all this so much better than me. So when you're done here, if you want to give me a like and a comment, but when you're done here, please go to his channel and take a look at his air defense videos. They will be linked in the comments below. However, Patriot missile system, according to specs I found online. Once again, these are online, so probably not 100%, okay? Has a range of about 99 miles. I call BS. A max speed of, for the Pack 2 Gym Plus, 3,500 miles an hour, or Mach 4.5. And the Pack 3, 3,830 miles per hour, or Mach 4.9. The Pack 2 series explodes close to a target to achieve a kill, while the Pack 3 uses a kinetic hit to kill an interception. In other words, it hits it dead on. Patriot's radar can track up to 100 targets and guide up to 9 missiles at once. Once again, according to the internet. The U.S. Army, while the U.S. military does like to put information out there for you, the taxpayer, American citizen, for you, the Canadian citizen who falls under our missile defense umbrella, for you, our European friends who are buying these things, well, at least your government is buying these things. You want to know what these things can do for you. You don't want to sit there and Well, is it a paperweight or is it God's gift to missile defense? So we put out numbers. Those numbers aren't right. I will never 100% say that they are right, but I will say that they are accurate enough. Once again, this is the same system that Habitual Line Crosser has trained soldiers on. It's been most of his career. So when I learn a lot about Patriot, I go to him. I literally go to his videos and watch and rewatch. One of the cooler things about this is so the US has a thing, and Fat Electrician says it a lot. It's never a war crime the first time. So the Patriot, when it is targeting aircraft, instead of targeting the aircraft itself, it targets a very specific part of the aircraft, being the cockpit. Because targeting pilots in distress after they've abandoned their aircraft is illegal, according to, international rules of war. But if he's flying the aircraft, he isn't in distress. Therefore, you can target him with the missile. And then he ejects and gets hit by a flying telephone pole. God, I love America. Our next system after the Patriot is the CRAM. And this is your real last line of defense. Honestly, it shouldn't even be a line of defense. If you are expecting this thing to shoot down anything ballistic missile coming from the other side of one of our oceans, you're SOL. You really are. The CRAM is a land-based Sea Whiz from the Navy. In other words, a really, really cool minigun. It uses radar and thermal sensors to track mortar rounds, rockets, low-flying aircraft. The Phalanx computer-controlled gun fires 4,500 rounds a minute to intercept incoming threats. But there's a problem with this, and we'll talk about it when it comes into the threats. The threats? The IRBM and ICBM, so interregional ballistic missile. Now it's called intermediate ballistic missile, and the intercontinental ballistic missile. Long-range ballistic missiles have incredible range and even more impressive speed when they descend to their targets. They move at roughly 15,000 miles per hour, or Mach 23, 24, there and about. Obviously different for every missile in every country, but there are so many out there, and I'm not going through literally over 100 plus missiles and giving all of those. So we're going to look at about Mach 23 to Mach 24. The USA has 400 Minuteman 3s. China has 400 ICBMs, Russia 286. North Korea has enough nuclear material on hand for about 40 to 50 ICBMs. And they have been testing long-range missiles. Missiles have different delivery methods and payloads, even within the same class. So in this case, a Minuteman II can do a ground detonation, it hits and blows, or it can do a air detonation, air burst. Most missiles flying this long aren't going to be delivering conventional high explosives. I'm sorry, if you're throwing this much money at a problem, you want the problem erased. And when it comes to nukes, if it detonates on the ground, you're letting the ground absorb too much of that blast and too much energy. So what you do is you'll do an air burst. And at the height where that happens, it's outside the CRAM's range. So like I said, if you're relying on the CRAM, you're SOL. WMDs, or ballistic missiles, can carry WMDs such as chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear, and can be employed in such systems as well as conventional warheads filled with high explosive. You usually don't see the high explosive. If you're wondering what radiological, because it sounds like nuclear, is there's a type of bomb called a dirty bomb, where you take a radioactive material, you grind it up into a nice fine sand. Hell, you can even put it with Regular beach sand, mix it up nice and well, let it contaminate that sand, large amounts of it, and then blow it up over an area. It's called assault weapon. Salt means it stands for what Rome did to Carthage, salting the earth. Nothing will ever grow or live there again. It is one of the most diabolical and disgusting weapons I've ever heard of. But it is something that could happen, something that has been made, thankfully never used. Of course, we all know chemical, such as nerve agents, things of that sort, biological like anthrax, and of course, we all know nuclear weapons. And then there's the other terrifying part. This is called the MIRV, or Multiple Independent Reentry Vehicle. MIRV equipped missiles carry multiple warheads that have different targets. Upon reaching their designated altitude, the cone of the missile is released, exposing the MIRVs. They can be programmed to release according to timing or released all at once and guided by GPS or other systems to their target. They're basically guided nuclear cluster bombs. This is another large threat. So while you may have so many missile systems ready to engage these missiles, if you don't get to them fast enough, then one becomes many. It is the economical way, the budget friendly way of destroying a nation and a people. So now we got to talk about the problems. The West Coast is 1,063 miles long. The East Coast is 1,463 miles long. Given that there are only 44 GMDs and they're on the West Coast, they cannot be relied on to protect the East Coast. If we were to spread all ground-based missile defense systems over the coast, it'd take 12 THAADs to cover the East Coast and 8 to cover the West. 15 Patriots would be needed to cover the East Coast, while 12 the West. I'm sorry, I got that one backwards, but 15 would be needed to cover the East, 12 the West. Okay, yeah, it was right. THAAD, we only have 400 interceptor missiles made for it and only 42 launchers. Patriot has over 480 launchers that the US owns and uses. We've given many to other countries, but 480 retained for us, and numerous missiles. And while it seems like it is feasible that we could cover all that ground, even with our aircraft and our ships, everything combined, you're assuming a 100% launch to kill rate. That is unrealistic. Misses happen. Miscalculations happen. And for every miscalculation, every miss, you now have a missile in the wild, and you have to rely on a secondary system to engage it. And then you also have time to reload. THAADs and Patriots don't reload like your standard firearm. Airplanes run out of missiles and ammunition, and while ships have dozens of vertical launch cells, they can't reload too fast, and you can't hit every missile with those. So while you can layer it, you would also have to bring in the 6th and 7th fleets right off the coast, which once again is unfeasible. So this doesn't even take in countermeasures such as chaff, flares, defender missiles, or lasers just to blind. They call them, what is it? Dazzlers that will blind our satellites or our missiles. And it doesn't even consider the overshoot of, say, targets in the middle of America. Well, that ballistic missile has to stay in the air longer and going over many of these smaller air defense systems. This is just simple math. You cannot cover the entire United States. It would take, you could feasibly, but not practically. It would take years to build all the systems, all the missiles. It would take years and years to implement them all over the country. But luckily, the United States had one of the best spawns ever. We've got two giant oceans on either side of us. We don't have to worry about Canada or Mexico lobbing in ballistic missiles. So then it's just a matter of keeping peace to the point where other countries don't feel the need to use these missiles on us. So this begs the question, why does it work in Israel? That's because Israel is so much smaller. From north to south, Israel is 290 miles long and 85 miles wide from east to west. And even with all those considerations, it still does not have a 100% intercept rate. You have the Arrow, which is designed to intercept long range missiles at about 250 kilometers. I'm not converting that to freedom units. David's Sling for intermediate or medium range missiles, and the Iron Dome itself, which everyone knows, which is a very short range, only 70 kilometers. Now, when you take into consideration that you may fire, say, 1,000 missiles at those systems, and say 800 get through. That's not really what you're looking for, though. What you're looking for is missiles that got to actual targets that could cause the damage that you're looking for. When you're actually looking at, say, protected areas, say Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, military bases, what have you. And it doesn't matter what side of the fence you fall on, liking Israel or hating it. When it comes to that, Israel has something like a 90% kill rate. So the systems themselves are good. It's just the employment of those systems. Another thing about air defense is you do not put air defense way out in the middle of nowhere. It is absolute best to put it right next to the target, because you know how that missile is going to come in now. As missile is coming in, it's almost on a straight line path. Far easier to shoot down when you're standing right in front of it. So that's pretty much why it doesn't work. Though I will say, our air defenses are absolutely glorious. Our missile defenses are amazing when put into scale. For theater scale, CRAM, Patriot, THAAD, and our Air Force work amazing. They shoot down whatever is coming toward their intended targets. When you bring it down to the size of, say, Fort Carson, Colorado, one THAAD, one Patriot battery, a couple CRAMs, and then whatever fighters happen to be nearby will defend that base from majority of incoming missile threats. It'll honestly defend that base from majority of incoming drone threats. And the CRAM itself will be very good against mortar and rocket attacks. But when you're talking of the entire square mileage of the United States as a whole, or if you want to get even bigger with it, United States and Canada, because Canada is part of NORAD, then it becomes completely unfeasible and untenable. And that's just looking at it coming from the seas. If you were to look at, say, Russia launching over the Arctic, now you have to worry about the entire northern border. That's even more systems, an even longer stretch. And you have to also layer it back. That way you can also defend the middle of America. One clever thing that we've done is we basically made sponge states. States where our intercontinental ballistic missiles and many of our stockpiles are sparsely populated, mostly covered in farmland. What this means is, in a first strike, those are usually the first targeted, so there is no retaliatory strike. This also means that we are sacrificing America's heartland and breadbasket to hopefully be able to get off a second strike via our bombers and subs. So I guess that is a form of defense, but when you take a look at likely targets, it'll be our Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles, many of our military stockpiles. Then it'll be military installations, which we have spread all around the country. And then it would be finally cities. You do not have enough missile defense systems to be put into every city in America to cover every threat angle, and then to also worry about reloads. So you'd have to have multiple of each in there. We just don't have enough. And just the fact of it is that so many, that you don't get 100% kill rate. So many would still get through. And when it comes to war, close is good enough with horseshoes, hand grenades, and nukes. Believe it or not, we got through that with just 2 takes. Literally all the way up to the point where I talk about Israel was 1 take, and then talking about Israel was another. This has probably been the fastest I've done one of these videos. And considering it's now Friday at 3:09 a.m., I'm very pleased about that. But thank you very much for tuning in. I know last Saturday was a bust. I was planning on talking about this live, but it's such a wide-scale topic that coming up with media for it was a pain, but trying to talk about it live is an even larger one. So this will be up this Saturday. Keep an eye out for shorts for it. Please, if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe. It really does help the platform. And then obviously, if you tune in for other shows, Trevor's Rant would be one, big help. The Morning Bump, Wintis just started up her Wintis Hall show. And now we've got 2 more shows premiering this month. So yeah, go ahead, hit that like button. Go ahead and hit that bell and tell me what you think. Possibly give me a topic to talk about or any questions you have. And hopefully when I get enough, I can make a response video to all the questions. Well, all the relevant questions. And I'll see you in the next one.
Got nothing to lose, cause I fought and felt the bruise. Now I'm not the one confused. Call the shots and they produce.